Ladies and gentlemen, today is August 19th, 2014. And this is the KNKL Show, episode 193, where we learn to be better artists. I am your host, Kienan Lafferty, and today we are going to be doing a tutorial on painting step by step, baby steps all the way. And I'm going to be featuring none other than the beautiful Riven from Ligue de Leyendos. And I'm going to be showing you, this is something I painted this afternoon, and I time-lapsed the whole thing. And I'm going to be trying something a little bit different today. And that is basically, I'm going to be showing the time-lapse, but I've actually gone through and made notes on top of the time-lapse. And I'll be pausing it, kind of talking about my thought process, and hopefully opening up the doorway of inspiration for you to work with your paintings. But before we get into that, we need to take a stroll down the lovely lane because you guys have been submitting your awesome artwork to the Facebook, and it makes me oh so happy. So once again, I just wanted to say thank you for submitting your lovely ladies and your beautiful artwork to the Facebook. For those of you who have not joined us yet, please consider typing in that link down below in the bottom left, or just click the link down below in the YouTube description. Come get some cookies, and we'll have a good time. So I love that zigs, that cow zigs. That was really funny. And yeah, just to let you know, I do look at all these, and I like them all personally. So yeah, if you want to get your art featured on the show, man, you guys submitted so much stuff. It just makes me so happy. Just warms my heart. Just warms my heart. But if you want to get your art featured, then just go ahead and do that. All right. With all that out of the way, let's go ahead and get into the tutorial time-lapse. Tutorial time-lapse Tuesday. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Let's see if this thing actually works. Because the way that I planned this to go is that this time-lapse is probably going to go for about 6 minutes. And I'm just going to pause it every now and then and just talk about what I am doing. Okay. Actually, let's start all over again. So the first thing I want to talk about is, obviously we have this drawing of Riven back over here, which is from the Planes of the Face tutorial. And I'm using that as our reference as we go about drawing the face from a 3/4 perspective. Now, for those of you who tuned in last week and watched me do the expressions tutorial, you'll see how I like to set up the face with a circle, and then I draw basically like the chin on top of it, like an egg shape. Then I'll put like a little cross through the middle of the circle to basically position the eyes and all that good stuff. And I always put the eyes below that middle part of the circle. And extra, like I push it even further down because the head is tilted more down. If you put them too high on the forehead, it's going to look a little bit creepy. So you're going to want to watch out for that. All right, so here's our first note. The first note is keeping the eyes lined up. And I do apologize for the lightness of the sketch, but hopefully you can see through to what I'm trying to explain. So, one of the most important things that you want to make sure that you're doing is making sure that that your phone is on silent and making sure that the eyes within the head are sitting on the same perspective plane. Okay? So you can see that both of these eyes are sitting within here. And something that I like to do is I'll actually draw the eyes within basically like thinking of them within the skull. And that helps me to basically position them and make sure that they're looking in the same direction. And something that really helps me with eyes is to, again, think about the curve that's happening on this one. That's actually the edge of the eyeball that you're seeing when it is looking at you from that angle. And yeah, so that's tip number one. Keep the eyes lined up, draw a little happy face, and everything will be good to go. So subtlety in the face. Subtlety in the face is up next. And this has to do with the lips. I'm actually demonstrating on the lips here. And I'm going to do a lot of very subtle things with the lips, and that is going to actually change the entire expression. So you can watch as I kind of like mess around, or maybe I already did it. I guess I already did it. Okay, anyway, we'll mess around with the lips some more later, but you'll see what I'm talking about. Okay, so now what I'm doing is something that I actually advised you guys against, and that is to draw a body off of a head. And the only thing that I can say in my defense here is that when you're drawing bust shots, which is basically what this is called, it's just from the head down to like the waist or like to the chest, you can get away with this a little bit more. And the reason why I think this is because your focus is on the face. Whereas if you're drawing something that relies heavily on the action or the body language of something, then it is a very, very bad idea to start with the head and build the body off of that. But because we're doing a bust shot, we can break our rules today, right? And because it is my kingdom and I get to just say, I get to retroact or whatever you want to call it. Go back on my own rules. All right. So moving on. I'm using shapes, right? That was what this old note was. I'm drawing in the body very, very quickly. Notice how I've drawn in the whole body, and I'm not worrying about, okay, let's draw the shoulder piece in like a lot of detail. And then later on realize that we don't even like the arm in that position, and now we have to redraw that entire shoulder piece. We have to redraw the entire, shoulder armor. And this is what is actually going to help us avoid that, and that is by working with very, very simple shapes. Very, very simple shapes to draw on the arm and just kind of figure out a general flow of how we want the character to be posed, as opposed to going into a lot of detail right off the bat. Okay, so work with those shapes, and you'll be happy. Save a lot of time and a lot of frustration. Now, the next thing we're going to talk about is flipping your piece. And the way that I do this is I've got it on its own layer over here, and I just hit Control-T, which is transform, and then you can right-click it once you have it selected like that, and then you can just flip it. Just hit flip horizontally. Flip it horizontally. And then also Control-J. Control-J is another good friend of ours because, see right here, this is called Sketch. And then above that is Sketch Copy. And I've talked with you guys about this before. And the reason why I like to use Control-J is because it duplicates the layer that you're working on currently. In this case, it's our sketch. And this allows it to act as sort of like a history state, like a saved history state, because you only got so many over here, right? You got like 40, 50, 60. I don't know. Some of you have like crazy computers. You got like 200. But I usually set around 60. And I always hit Control-J when I'm about to start making some major changes to my drawing. And I just need to have the ability to go back and compare to make sure, just to see if I'm progressing in a better way, progressing to a greener pasture, or I'm going down to the depths of hell. All right. So hell of drawing. So anyway, moving on. Man, it doesn't take too long to get from one note to the next. I'm glad though, because we got a lot of notes to go over. And I do hope I'm not going too fast. We got a lot of notes, like I said, and so we're just moving through it. Okay, so moving on. So you'll notice I did another thing here where I basically erased this whole thing. Again, this is why we didn't do a lot of detail on that piece right there, on that shoulder piece, because I just go through, I redraw almost everything. I redraw that arm, redraw the shape of that shoulder piece. And then the reason why I like that shoulder piece a lot more is because I'm working with shapes and I'm watching the flow of the piece. And basically the way that I can describe flow is just the way that, I don't know, just like having a certain lines that go through your sketch that the eye can follow without being like super like interrupted or just like ending on a weird tangent. It's just like everything feels very good. It feels very weighted and it feels very natural. So always watch out for that. And these are my things here, shapes and flow. So you'll notice how these are general shapes and composition lines that are happening within the piece. And I like them, so you know what that means. We're going to continue with that. All right. So I'm just continuing to draw on top of here. And this is one of my favorite stages. This is called the sculpting stage. Now that we have our shapes in place, we have our shapes in place. Now we are going to begin refining lines, erasing things out. I'm working just with the chalk brush and the eraser, and I am doing what we call sculpting of the lines and lassoing, using the crutch of Photoshop to enlarge and move things around to where we want. And I'm using the texture of the chalk brush. And for those of you who want to get my brushes, you can download them again in the YouTube description below. I love this brush. Ever since I've been introduced to this brush, I've fallen in love because it is so versatile. You can use it for lines, you can use it for shading, you can use it for everything. Someone once described it as drawing with butter. I forget who's one of the viewers said it that way, and I was like, that's exactly what it feels like. It's just so moldable, and yet you can refine it at the point that you need to towards the end. So yeah, I'm basically just laying in some values, cleaning up lines, and sculpting. Using the knowledge that I learned from the planes of the face to create and add my shadows to this face. Okay, and making sure I'm comparing the two, saying, does this face over here to the left look like the one that I'm drawing? Want to make sure Riven is still looking like her sexy self. All right. Oh, that was an important one. Let's go back to that. Okay. Make sure your eyes are not too far apart. Okay. So the way that I like to measure this is to think about the actual tear duct of your eye. And if you were to place another eyeball between this tear duct and this tear duct, it would be basically exactly one more eye apart. And this is a problem that I constantly run into whenever I draw faces from this plane. Sometimes the eye looks like it's getting sucked to the side of the head, like it's like weirdly floating there, or sometimes the eyes are too close together, or they're too far apart. So that's a general idea of how I like to space my eyes. Let's put one more eye in between, and there you have it. One eye between. Moving on. All right. So for those of you who are curious about some of my work schedule, I actually like to make sure I'm taking breaks whenever I do these paintings, especially when you're drawing faces, particularly when you're drawing beautiful women, because what's really interesting is after even just like 30 to 45 minutes of painting a face, you already see that face differently than somebody who would just like walk up behind you and look at that face for the first time. And I don't know exactly why this happens, but it's good to take breaks. That way you can come back with fresh eyes. And again, I'm flipping the canvas because that also gives me a fresh take on everything. I can like line up, I can check out the facial expressions, I can check out the shapes and the flow. It just allows me to see mistakes that I didn't see before. Now, moving on. The next note we have is referencing your own hands when you're doing stuff like this. Now, what's really cool about Photoshop, this goes back to flipping the canvas, is say, okay, I'm drawing her right hand, right? Her right hand on the sword, because this is flipped, right? Her right hand has the big glove on it, but I'm drawing it flipped because my right hand is occupied with the stylus. I can't reference my own hand and then draw with my left, okay? But when you flip the canvas, your left hand now becomes their right. Does that make sense? I really hope that makes sense. I tried to explain that as good as possible. But basically, you can use this hand for referencing whatever hand you want. All you need to do is just mirror the image, and then you can draw both hands. So that's what I'm doing here. I flipped the image so that way I could reference my left hand to draw her right. Okay? See, there you go. See, now we flipped it back. The hand looks fine because we flipped the canvas and used the power of reflection. So we've reflected upon our piece, we reflected upon ourselves, and made it good. All right, so now we're just doing some more line refinement. Line refinement, was that a note? I have no idea what that note was. Oh, no, that wasn't. That was just the thing there. Okay, so I'm adding values and refinement using our good old-fashioned chalk brush. And that's basically all I'm doing. Like, I'm taking these shapes, and then now I'm starting to go in and be like, okay, where exactly do these fingers, end? Or how exactly are these lines going to look? How exactly is the shine and the texture going to look on top of this shoulder piece here? And I really think it's just the funnest part. Once you've got everything laid in, once you build your drawing on top of a great foundation, a strong foundation, nice and solid, then the rest just becomes very, it's very like relaxing. I feel like I almost get into a meditative state when I start doing this type of stuff. Until I go back and start painting the face, then stuff starts getting a little bit more crazy. But we will get to that when the time comes. So, just adding value, refining, drawing in little details. This sword, drawing that sword in perspective wasn't too hard. I think I pulled up the LOL skin viewer just to have that. All right, so you'll notice right here, I made a note for you, very important note, went on a short break. And this, like I said, this happens to me about every half an hour to 45 minutes of working. I'll notice I start to get kind of, like, I'm in this meditative state, but then I start to get kind of complacent. I start to feel like my mind is, like, not fully immersed in what I'm trying to do. I'm not truly focused on where I'm trying to get. I'm just kind of like refining lines, kind of like adding values. And short breaks are one of the best things that you can do to take a step back from whatever piece you're working on and redefine exactly where you're trying to get. Pulling your focus back in and saying, okay, I need to do this and this and this and this and this. And I look at this and be like, okay, I need to refine this hand, that hand, blah, 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 blah. And then it's a really nice way to not only get back in the, just the mentality of like being excited to work, right? Being excited to work, I think, is something that too often, your willpower just runs out. Your willpower always runs out with paintings. And if you don't take breaks, then you'll start to kind of like resent your drawing or your painting. You'll start to make mistakes. You'll start to waste time. And at the end, you'll be like, oh, why did I spend all this time painting that arm? I didn't even need it to be that way. Whereas if you would have just taken a short 15-minute break, you would have realized, hey, you know what? That arm looks a little bit weird. I should probably just, correct it right now. And then you'll oftentimes get the solution for what you want the arm to look like while you're on that break. So, cannot stress enough to you guys, my work schedule includes plenty of breaks. And I think yours should too. All right. So we're using a little bit of like the warp gate technology there on her eye. Because once again, talking about don't let the eye get sucked to the side. Which happens quite a bit in my drawings. The eye looks like it starts to get like yanked to the side of their head. So I just kind of just warped it down a little bit, letting the brow kind of cover a little bit more of the actual eye. And now we're starting to get someplace. Now we're starting to get to a nice place. Not too much forehead, okay? I actually lassoed the entire hair, if you want to go back and check that out. When I moved that eye down, I felt like it made her forehead just a tad bit too big. So I just lassoed the hair, moved it down a couple pixels. It's amazing how small of adjustments make like big differences, especially with like faces and stuff. So always be on the lookout for those and use them to your advantage, because sometimes I like to think about this. If the face isn't looking right, oftentimes it's not that you need to add more. Oftentimes it's that you need to figure out what needs to be simplified, almost what needs to be taken away, and go back to the original sketch, whatever you liked about the original sketch. So that's why, again, Control J, saving your old sketches, comes in really handy, because you get to go back and compare to, hey, what is this face capturing that this later one that I've painted doesn't? Or what is now improved with the painted one? Because sometimes your faces will improve. But oftentimes I always compare to my old versions, and that's what I'm doing right here. See, so I'm comparing back to this one, and I was like, I kind of like the character that was in this one, but I feel that her eyes were just a little bit too far apart. She kind of looked a little bit, I don't know, it's a little more stylized. And whereas as I started to continue refining, her face became a little bit more realistic, and I like that a little bit more as far as ribbon goes. So we're just refining, and we are getting ready to move on to adding values. Now, the way that I like to add values to my drawings is once I have a bit of line art that is, I'm fairly satisfied with, I'm now going to darken those values. Basically, this is our sketch. These are our lines. And because we have drawn and erased our values instead of drawing like with gray and then drawing with white, this is another thing that I like to do that I probably should have said. This is the way that I like to work. Is my white values are not actually me painting white. I'm just erasing. I'm just erasing away the gray that was there. So all the white in this picture is basically you seeing through to the background. And that is very, very important that you set it up that way if you'd like to do this type of technique. Because this is what we're going to do next. See how I darkened all those lines? And now I'm going to start laying in more value behind the sketch, as you can see down here in the layers. Okay, so I'm just laying in some values to the skin. And that makes us happy. And that can only be done, once again, like I said, if you set up your lines that way. Or you can set up to multiply too, but then you can't color them in the same way that I like to do. Now I'm starting to color the lines a little bit. And the way that I do that is you'll notice over here that little lock symbol. You get that symbol on your lines by clicking this button right there. And this is a very magical button because it basically says, okay, once you click this button, you can no longer paint any more lines. Rather, you can only color the existing pixels that are on this layer. So that allows you to effectively paint your lines, make them more subtle, and I just love doing it. It's super fun, super easy, and just makes your life so much easier. So try it out for yourself, see if it works. I don't know, it might work for you, it might not. What if it did? What if it did? All right. So now we are just adding more little values and all that stuff. Going on a final break here, because once again, I am ready to finish it up. I'm ready to face my opponent, my final opponent. And before that, I must rest before my fight. And we are going to be going into OP mode. OP mode. Overpainting, basically. Overpowered mode. And this is where we finally go above and beyond everything that we've laid down thus far, above the sketch lines, above the values, and we are beginning to paint on top of everything. So basically, this is the whatever you say goes. Final stage, final phase of the painting. And this is where I like to just go in and add all those tiny little details to the face, adding little speculars to the nose, drawing out a little bit more details in the eyes or on the body. I tend to like to focus on skin areas, so the face, arms, a little bit of her neck, because I find that those are the places where people are going to be the most, not judgmental, but those are the places that people are going to look first, because you can get away with metallic things and cloth and armor and all that stuff, but everybody has skin. So everybody's very, very familiar with that, and they're going to be very scrutinizing about the way that you draw your skin. So I always like to pay very close attention, make sure that my faces and my skin are the first things that I like to focus on, because I think that once you got that looking good, then you're basically, you're home free. So most of my time spent in the overpainting was on the face. Then I add a little bit of fancy effects, make the background a little bit darker, and paint white behind the character. Behind the character, you can see here, group 1 is the lines and all that stuff. And then that white is just kind of putting light back into it, because you can see when I made the background dark. This will actually explain a little bit more of how I paint. Okay, so watch what happens. When I darken this background, see how you can actually see now exactly where I've laid in the white overpainting. But the lines, once again, this is how I set them up. You can see right through them. So to add white back into it, obviously I gotta paint white behind it. And this just helps to pop the character off the background a little bit more. I don't know, it's just more of a personal preference. I just kind of do it. It's a nice little final touch. And then I add a little bit of multiply layer to it. You can see I've set up my multiply layer, and I've clipped it back to, I've actually now merged that whole group into one piece. So now it's just one piece of paper. It's one layer. And the multiply layer is going right on top of it. And it's now set as a clipping mask. And the way that you do that is simply hold Alt, and then you click right between those two layers, and it'll make it a clipping mask, or basically a stencil. And there you have it. There you have it. Some nice little final effects. Add a little bit of color to the background. All that good jazz. Kind of changing some things, with color balancing and all that stuff. Nothing too crazy. And that brings us to our final piece here. All right, so let's go ahead and sum up everything that we've learned today. Everything that we've learned today. Go ahead and grab my notes here. Grab my note-taking stuff over here. So the most important things that I want you guys to consider are and I can actually see a little bit of a problem here. Remember I talked about lining up the eyes? Oh man, I guess they line up if you do it that way. Actually, you know what? That might be okay. Yeah, we're good. So the lines, again, are lined up, okay? Eyes are lined up. There's about one eye in between. See, here's one tear duct. Here's the other tear duct. If we were to place another eye between there. We're looking good. We're looking very good. And you guys can really notice how a lot of my overpainting is spent on the face. I didn't really bother with a lot of the other stuff because, again, it's not the focal point. The focal point is the most important place to make sure you get your detail in. And most of the time, it is going to be your character's face. So spend the time. Give her the time she deserves, guys. Ladies, give the guys the time they deserve. And everybody will be happy. So, with that, we are going to end today's tutorial. I hope that this has helped you guys out a little bit. This picture is actually going to be available. I'm going to be uploading it to my DeviantArt, so you can check it out for yourself in high res and kind of look at the little details. And again, you can get my brushes for free, watch the tutorial, try out some of the techniques for yourself. Hope it helps you guys out. Yeah, with that, I think we're going to call it good. So thank you guys for joining me on YouTube. Thumbs up if you like it, thumbs down if you don't. My name is Kienan Lafferty. I'll see you guys next time. Till then, take care.